Hello and welcome to another episode of the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. And I'm your host, Tim Wilkins, joining you once again and talking about week 6 of the NFL and the storylines that kind of precluded and finished the week 6 of the NFL. At the time of this recording, there has been an announcement that Devontae Adams has indeed been traded from the Las Vegas Raiders to the New York Jets in lieu of a couple, I believe, a draft pick. So let's kind of cut right into the action of what actually occurred this week in the NFL. And there's a lot of storylines that kind of lay out here. And it started off with the 49ers and the Seahawks. That game was pretty much a back and forth matchup. But the 36-24 score really doesn't indicate really where that game was going. Brock Purdy was decisive, but there was also some opportunities there by the Seahawks there in the third and the fourth quarter that kept the game pretty tight. And then after that score in that situation there, we got ourselves into Sunday games, excuse me. And Sunday started off with the 9 a.m. London game, the Bears versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Caleb Williams did throws for 4 touchdowns. Just really, arguably a really hot start of the the NFL Sunday ticket, if you ask me. 35-16 was a score. The Bears keep rolling. And then there were the 1:00 games kind of just, I hate to say it, just, there was a little bit of parity, but a lot of what you expected. And I'll start with the Patriots and the Texans in Foxborough. C.J. Stroud throws for 3 touchdowns, and even Drake May, he had himself a very reasonable game as a rookie on his first start, but they just couldn't get the Texans off the field. And the Texans scored 41-21. The game was really never in doubt. There was some interceptions there. I think 2 interceptions by Drake May. Just overall, the quarterback plays his first start. So I really can't be too, I guess I can be judgmental. But in reality, just a unique slate of games for the 1:00, because after that game, the Packers and the Cardinals, that game was never in question. Jordan Love against the Cardinals. The Titans and the Colts, that game was actually relatively close. Joe Flacco throw for 2 touchdowns, less than 200 yards throwing of the ball, and won that game 20-17. Now the game later, or I guess you say in the 1:00, that really kind of got the eyes open to the scoring of the NFL was the Buccaneers and the Saints. And Baker Mayfield, they scored 51 points on the Saints, who were arguably the highest scoring offensive side of the team of the ball the first couple of weeks of the season. So definitely good to see. I think Chris Godwin went for 11 receptions, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns. Baker Mayfield went for about 325, I believe, 4 scores. So then we get down to the dumpster of the week, and I say this nicely. It's the Browns and the Eagles, and legitimately, they need to answer some serious questions there in Cleveland about their quarterback. The problem is that the amount of dead cap space that is on the books for Deshaun Watson is just monumental in just Everest size in proportion, and they cannot get rid of that contract as much as they really genuinely probably want to. They cannot. It's going to probably handicap that franchise for decades. So what they can do, and probably will do, is try to draft a quarterback and do the best they can in this situation. It's not a good look because they're if you look at the dead cap is bad until 27, I think. So at that point, it's 26 million on the dead cap. So they either have to trade him away, which no one's going to take that monster of a contract on, and they're not going to trade away some draft picks in favor of it. So they're kind of stuck with what they have, and unfortunately, it's a whole lot of mediocrity. The Eagles, don't get me wrong, they didn't really do much of anything either, but they did win that game 20-16. So that being said, all right, let's kind of dive into the games that are really enjoyable to watch, and I mean this sincerely. Um, was definitely these next two games that I think genuinely as a fan that you will enjoy watching. And it was the Ravens versus the Commanders. That game was down to the wire, and still seeing Lamar Jackson do his thing. Derrick Henry really just be a man amongst boys. 24 for 132, two touchdowns, 323 yards throwing for Lamar, only one touchdown, but really throwing touchdown anyway. But it was I say a collective effort for the Baltimore Ravens, and they're showing more and more how awesome that team really can be. And I think going down the stretch, I've been calling down for this since the beginning of the NFL season. The Baltimore Ravens are definitely the team that are going to be playing against the Kansas City Chiefs. It's just a matter of to what extent that health. Obviously, there's always injuries throughout the NFL season. Who's healthy, who's not, who has enough tape, who's really good on the defensive side of the ball. And really, what we're seeing is the teams are getting better down the stretch here. The Chargers and the Broncos game was one of the fewer, surprisingly, pretty reasonable games to watch. And the reason why I bring this up was in the 4 o'clock window or the 3:30 window for the Central Time Zone. There really wasn't too many good games. And I mean this, and I'll talk about some of the disappointments here in a minute, is that this game was actually probably one of the cool back and forth divisional rivals. It's a West Coast game, so it's you expect these two teams to be on the 4:30 or the 3:30 window, and they put on a show, 23-16 for the Chargers. Justin Herbert did his thing. J.K. Dobbins for the Chargers. But what really shows to me is that you are seeing the Broncos develop. You're seeing really the continuation of development for the Broncos. And not to be confused with this next disappointment of a game that I'm just baffled by was the Steelers and the Raiders. Steelers went into Las Vegas and put up 32 points on the board with a quarterback for the Raiders that no one's ever heard of. And it was just insane how really just dynamite they really were. And so one thing that I really want to emphasize in the next conversation of games here in this really just the storyline that really needs to be discussed is the next game here. And this is the Dallas Cowboys versus the Detroit Lions. As a resident of the city of Dallas and part of the Metroplex, this game is what kind of just gave me the what the moment of the week. The Cowboys arguably were the team to beat in the NFC due to a lot of hype, a lot of offseason moves, the re-signing of Dak Prescott on a very high level contract, and the expectations were definitely there. And the score of this game was 47-9. It was arguably nothing more than an onslaught and a massacre. And as a Patriots fan, I was excited to see this because, you know, it's always fun to see the Cowboys lose, but not like this. And I mean that respectfully, because the Cowboys in themselves, listen, mediocrity is mediocrity, but the only team that they should have paid CeeDee Lamb before they paid Dak Prescott. Take 10 million off the cap of the contract, spread that contract over for CeeDee Lamb and pay him, and or pay him more, and they didn't. CeeDee Lamb was arguably the most productive offensive player for the Cowboys, and it only resulted in 9 points. The problem too that the Cowboys have is a unique one, right? I think many sports fans can illuminate to this as their own cities that they have problems with over the years, is that the Cowboys have a fan base that is I call it fair weathered. You know, they don't enjoy, I don't think any fan base enjoys losing, but every year the Cowboy fan base comes out saying that they're going to win the Super Bowl because it's the Cowboys, right? Jerry Jones, they won 5 Super Bowls in the 90s. The expectations were there. Now, as a 30-year-old person, the last time the Dallas Cowboys have been in the Super Bowl have now been almost 30 years. And I mean that respectfully. The last time the Dallas Cowboys were in the Super Bowl was 1995. Okay. Sometimes they need to do some reevaluations inside the organization because the players are the players, but the players can only put out so much results if they are set up for success. You'll hear, and this is coming from a Patriots fan, so a lot of people are not going to enjoy this, and they're really not because they're going to be like, "You're not, your team's last. They won a lot. Boo-hoo." Listen, during the '90s, the New England Patriots were exactly what the Jacksonville Jaguars were of the league. They were 4-12, 3-13, 5-12. They were mediocre at best during the '90s. Okay. The Buffalo Bills ran through that division. And heck, they played against the Dallas Cowboys in many Super Bowls. So let's continue talking about this situation. There needs to be some serious changes in the Cowboys organization going forward. And I think Jerry Jones has already given as much, if not more, deferment of his GM duties to his son. Okay. I think a lot of fans forget that. Okay. And a lot of the GM duties and the personnel decisions have gone through Steven. I think bringing in someone that is not family to be a GM might be a beginning of a vote of confidence to the fan base that said maybe we don't know. Maybe we're wrong. And listen, Stephen Jones can still be the vice president or president of football operations, right? Or whatever you want to call it, the title. I think eliminating his involvement in the organization is key. I also believe that the Cowboys losing the defensive coordinator, who is now the head coach of the Washington Commanders, Dan Quinn, is very telling here. It's very apparent now how great of a how really a good coach Dan Quinn is. Okay, and Dan Quinn, for lack of a better word, has gone through some challenges himself in his career. Okay, he was the coach of the Atlanta Falcons, who, okay, let's talk about that too. Didn't have any front office help or ownership involvement. And then when they did, they finally made it to the Super Bowl and he was there and they lost, I believe, and they fired him. And you know, so when does Mike McCarthy take the ownership of the losing and the mediocrity? When does he own it? Right? If you look at his departure from Green Bay, you kind of have a very similar scenario here. You have a quarterback that's probably arguably the most expensive quarterback in the franchise history, and you're getting a mediocre. I think you're still going to see a 10-6 or 10-7 record, or maybe more wins than that. Who knows? Because if they're losing to Detroit, which by the way, Detroit's not a terrible team like they have been in the '90s, but it it's different now. I'll just give you the box score here. Okay, the box score of this game was remarkable, and that it was legitimately 17 for 33, two interceptions. Cooper Rush even played for a handful of snaps, had one interception, went 8 for 11 with one interception. Okay. This game should never have been this far out of reach. And the fact that it was is a difference of coaching, the ability of the coaching staff to get these players prepared. It looked like, okay, listen, there were some defensive injuries, and yes, players do get injured in the NFL. That doesn't change things. It doesn't. Just because players are injured doesn't remove the fact that legitimately the Dallas Cowboys are in the bottom of the barrel of the NFC. Doesn't change it. The only team on the bottom of the barrel there is a 2-4 New York Giants team who played Sunday night, and that game should never have been on Sunday Night Football. I believe Boston Connor said it best. It is a disgrace to the NFL football fans that game was even slated. They could have flexed that team out and put something else that was more competitive from the 4 o'clock window. Okay. Even this game that we're talking about here, the Falcons and the Panthers. Okay. We'll just talk about that briefly before we go to the Sunday night game. It's a divisional rivalry. Why couldn't that have been the Sunday night game? Because the Panthers were the Panthers? It's still a divisional rivalry game. The Dallas Cowboys and the Lions game, regardless of the scoreboard, could have been the Sunday night game. So going into the Sunday night game, the Bengals were 1-4, going against a team that was 2-4, the New York Giants. That was a Sunday night game. If you were an NFL fan, you believe you got slapped in the face. It is ridiculous. Ridiculous. And that game was terrible. Cincinnati went for 208 yards throwing by Joe Burrow, who a couple years ago was an MVP candidate. Daniel Jones rushed for more yards than he has in a long time with 56. And if you are definitely a same game parlay player, you're just getting yourself beat up on some of these Sunday games. So I wouldn't bet anything on the Giants anytime soon. But the Monday night game kind of, I would say, redeemed the week for us. And if you're a fan of the AFC East, you had the Buffalo Bills versus the New York Giants, or New York Jets, excuse me. And of course, this game was before they announced the trade, which happened 24 hours later with Devontae Adams, who is now a New York Jet. So, get down to it. Aaron Rodgers threw for 23 for 34, 295, 2 touchdowns. Definitely a weird interception at the end, argument about what route to run, but the Bills win that game. And legitimately, Bryce Hall, definitely a great player. And I mean that. Bryce Hall for the New York Jets, 113 yards rushing on 18 carries. That's remarkable. That's over 5 yards a carry. You know, Lassard had 114 yards and one touchdown on 6 throws. Like, it's just a great atmosphere for the Jets on what they can do, but they got to turn themselves around here. They really do. And of course, them coming with a new head coach or an interim head coach, they are on the bottom of the barrel, and the New England Patriots are last place in the AFC East. So the Miami Dolphins are 2-3. They were on bye week. So let's see what happens here down the stretch. Okay. This game, with the over under on this game, was 42.5, with the Buffalo Bills with a -1.5 favorite. Okay. The spending lines don't lie. They covered both the line and the over. So good job by the handicappers. And overall, I think the storyline is going to continue here. And some storylines to take away for week 7, I think it's going to be really important to talk about here, is what's the incorporation of Devontae Adams in the week 7, right? Um, who's going to be the shitty of the two 1-5 teams at 8:30 in the morning on Sunday this week? The Patriots or the Jaguars? The Colts versus the Dolphins. Then you have divisional rivalry games. You have the Eagles and Giants, Vikings and the Lions. You have the Chiefs and the 49ers, which is at 3:30, which is going to be good. The Sunday, there's 2 Monday night games this week. It's going to be the Chargers and the Cardinals, and the Ravens and the Buccaneers. So 2 Monday night games on the 21st of October. Sunday night games is Jets and the Steelers. So that should be entertaining. So there's really no scheduling issues. And I think, the Browns and the Bengals, that'll be a terrible 12 o'clock game. Titans and Bills, Bills should do their thing. Seahawks and Falcons, that should be entertaining. But the Thursday game, I believe, is going to be one of those, question mark games. It's going to be the Saints or the Broncos. And I really don't see the Broncos losing this game. I think Bo Nix is kind of coming into form, and I think Sean Payton's working on that. So I think we have a lot to look forward to here in week 7. And I appreciate everyone joining me to kind of go through the week 6 outlooks and going into week 7 here. But I think we have a lot to look forward to. Hopefully the Cowboys fire Mike McCarthy here by week 10. Let's look forward to. And heck, maybe, just maybe, the New England Patriots might win a couple games. Minus that, hope everyone has a great rest of your week. We're coming down to the wire here on the election Sundays. I hope everyone has a great rest of your weekend. Remember, if you can, vote early, vote in person, and do your civic duty, ladies and gentlemen. We are in election season. Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer, as they say. Hope everyone has a great rest of your week.